This day in sports history. Hey, real quick, you've heard me talk a lot about the Sterling Soap Company over the past few months, and if you haven't tried out their soaps, I get it. It's not easy changing up your routine. But let me just say, if you give them a try, I'm nearly 100% certain you will have zero regrets. They carry not only bar soap, but shave soap, liquid body soap, body lotions, beard balm, lip balm, and a lot more. Plus, there are myriad scents to choose from. Their products are made with natural ingredients and scented oils, and they are committed to being environmentally conscious. And I always get a handwritten note on my packing slip, so I know it's been checked before shipping, and it's a nice little human touch in a world that seems to be going away from that. Give Sterling Soap a try today at sterlingsoap.com. And welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History. It's September 25th, and on this day in 1971, the Marshall Thundering Herd won a football game. That in itself wouldn't be something of any great importance if it was not in the context of the tragedy that occurred 10 months earlier on November 14th, 1970, when a plane carrying most of Marshall's football team, coaching staff, athletic administrators, and a few fans, returning from a game at East Carolina, crashed in Canova, West Virginia. All 75 on board were killed. The team put together for the 1971 season included 3 players who had not made that trip to East Carolina due to injury. Sophomores recruited to play at Marshall, but were not eligible to play the previous year due to NCAA restrictions on freshman participation. Also, that particular rule was waived for Marshall for the 71 season to allow for freshmen recruited by Red Dawson and new head coach Jack Lingle to play immediately. There were also 35 walk-ons who made it through tryouts, 5 basketball players, and a place kicker who had never seen a football game prior to 1971. There were no expectations for anybody outside this team. A winless season would have been completely understandable. In their opening game, the young Thundering Herd lost at Morehead State 29-6. Here in Week 2 of the season, it was set to be an emotional day in Huntington, West Virginia, for the home opener. All tickets were sold, and the stadium was packed with 13,000 that day. Xavier were 3 touchdown favorites entering this game, but they had trouble scoring. They didn't turn the ball over once that day, but Marshall had a bend but don't break kind of attitude on defense, and they kept the Musketeers out of the end zone in the first 30 minutes. Blakely Smith kicked a 31-yard field goal to end the first quarter, and that was all the scoring in the first half. It was his first career field goal, which is amazing in itself when you realize that he'd only been kicking a football for about a week. Xavier took the lead in the third quarter on a 1-yard run. Marshall fought back, and when starting sophomore quarterback Reggie Oliver led the Herd on an 8-play, 73-yard drive that ended with Oliver taking it over the goal line from the 2, it was 9-6 Marshall. The dream finish appeared lost late in the fourth quarter, though, when Xavier's John Gompers ran a punt back 48 yards for a touchdown to put Xavier back on top 13-9, with 4 minutes, 8 seconds left in the game. Oliver had also suffered an elbow injury in the second half, and he watched on the sideline as the offense stalled out on the next possession. Knowing the team needed him, though, he pushed through the pain and re-entered the game with 1 minute, 19 seconds to play and 48 yards to go for the score. Facing a 4th and 10, Oliver found a receiver, and the 11-yard gain gave the Herd a fresh set of downs and a lot of hope. They picked up another crucial first down seconds later when Oliver hit Jerry Aerosmith, who was brought down at the 13-yard line. And that set up the final play of the game. With 1 second left on the clock, Oliver found fullback Terry Gardner open at the 10. Jack Crabtree picked up the key block to free Gardner to get into the end zone with no time left. In their first home game since the tragic plane crash 10 months earlier, the Marshall Thundering Herd had won the game 15-13. Head coach Jack Lingle called it a heck of a satisfying day. And of course, the story of the tragedy and the recovery of the program, along with the win on this day, was told in the 2006 movie We Are Marshall, starring Matthew McConaughey as Coach Lingle. Marshall went on to win one other football game that season, beating Bowling Green 12-10 in their third home game of the year. This game against Xavier put the teams on opposite trajectories, though. While Marshall would build off this win and go on to win 1AA national titles in 1992 and again in 1996, Xavier struggled, losing upwards of $200,000 a year on the football program, and it was shut down after the 1973 season. On this day in 1982, it was another special win on the gridiron for a college team, but this one was for a completely different reason. The Northwestern Wildcat football team of the mid-70s and 80s defined futility. From 1976 through 1981, that's 6 seasons, the Wildcats won a total of 3 games. If it hadn't been for a 27-22 win at home over Wyoming on September 15, 1979, the losing streak that I'm working up to would have been 13 games longer. But they did win that game, so starting on September 22, 1979, when the Northwestern Wildcats lost 54-21 to Syracuse, through to this day in 1982, they lost 34 consecutive football games. Over that span, they were shut out 8 times, outscored by an average of 30 points a game, and only came close 3 times in that stretch of ending the futility early. There was a close 4-point loss to number 16 Purdue in 1979. They lost by a touchdown to number 11 Michigan in 1980. And they came closest to breaking the losing streak on the opening weekend of the 81 season, dropping a 21-20 heartbreaker to Indiana. But this is a story about triumph, about redemption, a never give up, never say die spirit. So on this day, Northwestern, led by future NFL head coach Dennis Green on the sideline, finally snapped their string of 34 consecutive losses with a 31-6 trouncing of Northern Illinois. It was certainly cause for celebration, and the students stormed the field. They tore down the goalposts, and then laked them in Lake Michigan. The Wildcats would go on to win 2 more games that season, beating a bad Minnesota team 2 weeks later and a not very good Michigan State team in November. Now, this was not the start of a turnaround. It would not be until 1995 that the Northwestern football team would post a winning record. Of course, in 95, they surprised all of college football with an undefeated run through the Big Ten, a number 3 ranking, and a trip to the Rose Bowl. The 34-game losing streak is still the FBS record, but it pales in comparison to the All Divisions record that I'll talk about in a few days. On this day in 2000, Vince Carter defied gravity, physics, geometry, along with expectations of what is humanly possible. Carter, also known as Air Canada, nearly broke away from the planet's gravitational pull. So the game in which this happened was a preliminary round game in the 2000 Olympics, held in Australia that year. The U.S. were playing France, and with a little over 16 minutes to play, the U.S. had a comfortable 15-point advantage. France rebounded a Gary Payton miss, and they thought they were about to go on a fast break, but a sloppy, no-look behind-the-back pass was easily poached by Vince, and there was no time to request takeoff from the tower. He simply gunned the throttle and elevated quickly over 7'2" Fredrick Weis. Weis said later he was trying to draw the charge. If he had to do it all over again, he would have just cleared the runway. Well, the French media are the ones who gave the dunk the title Le Dunk de la Mort, which my rudimentary high school French translates into the dunk of death. And the reaction was immediate. Everybody was stunned by not only how quickly Vince got off the ground, but how high he got to jump over a 7'2" Weis. The U.S. couldn't celebrate too much in the moment because they had to get back on defense, but they certainly enjoyed it later. Jason Kidd called it the greatest play in basketball that he'd ever seen. Others made the argument in the aftermath, and now 24 years on, that it's the best in-game dunk in the history of basketball. On this day in 1962, Sonny Liston finally got his shot at the heavyweight title. Floyd Patterson had won the heavyweight belt back from Ingemar Johansson in 1959. Patterson and Johansson fought a third time before Liston could get his shot, despite his ranking as the top contender. The problem was, there were a lot of people who did not want Patterson to step into the ring with Liston. Patterson's trainer Customato had a healthy fear of Liston's 15-inch fists and what they could do to his fighter. But he claimed that Liston's relationship with the Chicago mob was the real reason, and at this point, that was a concern. There were also racial undertones. Despite both of these fighters being black, white America and most of black leadership in the country in 1962 preferred the clean-living Patterson, known as the Gentleman of Boxing, over Liston, who could not read, barely write more than his name, and had spent time in prison. Even the president, JFK, got involved. He strongly urged Patterson to forego any fight with Liston. But Liston had earned his shot, and Patterson finally relented. And so on this night, the pair met in the ring in Chicago's Comiskey Park. And while the country favored Patterson, the gamblers favored Liston as an 8-5 betting favorite. It was one of those rare occasions when the challenger was favored over the champion. And not only was Liston a more powerful fighter, but he had a long reach. Plus, he outweighed Floyd by 25 pounds. And this fight was over quickly. Patterson took a beating in the opening seconds. He tried to get inside and utilize his speed, but he just couldn't reach the big bear. Liston landed a powerful left hook to the champ's jaw and followed that up with a huge right uppercut, and Patterson was done. It took all of 2 minutes and 6 seconds for Sonny Liston to win the heavyweight title. Time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? In the movie Star Wars, A New Hope, that's the first one that came out, but episode 4 in the lineup, Darth Vader is on screen for only 11 minutes. That's all I've got for you today. This and every episode of This Day in Sports History is researched, written, voiced, and produced by me, Steve White. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History.